Hi, I'm Amber, mother of Jessalyn Torres. I've been very open all this time about the injuries my daughter has obtained the night of November 21st, 2021. I even created daily logs so people could stay informed on her condition. But I've never truly talked about my feelings and how that day has affected my family. So this will be a very hard one for me. Let me put picture one. The event started off joyous, and I had 4 of my children with me that evening, all of which still suffer in some form to this day. The screams, the sounds of the people being hit, watching as their bodies flew, the visions of their bodies lying everywhere, and me yelling, searching for Jessalyn, still replays over and over in my head. I found my daughter lying in front of the music truck, nowhere near the rest of her teammates, in the middle of the 5 points with her clothes ripped from her body. Road rash everywhere, blood leaking out of the corner of her mouth and half of her face missing. Picture 2. My poor child was ripped out of her shoes, drug under the front end, and thrown out from that vehicle. There was no ambulance, no medical equipment, nothing to help me and my child. I have never felt this helpless in my life. All I could do was hold my child and tell her Mommy was here and that she will be okay. Picture 3. A deputy and an officer came to help get my daughter on top of the blankets that were covering her naked body and drove us to the hospital in the back of an SUV. I am grateful for the actions they took that day, along with all the others who ran out into the street to help my daughter. When we got to Children's Hospital, I sat there in a chair numb as I watched multiple doctors, nurses, and medical staff rush in and out of the room examining my child's lifeless body. My mental state was confused. I lost who I was, and I felt like I was sitting in the middle of some crazy movie scene where there was so much commotion around you, but you hear none of it. I stayed numb from then on. It was my coping mechanism. There was no way to prepare myself for the news I was about to hear from the medical staff. Her injuries included a fractured skull, a hematoma behind her eye, 8 broken ribs, which was 4 on each side, bilateral lung contusions, 3 fractured lumbar vertebrae. Her bowel was damaged, her kidney was ripped from its blood supply and was dying. She now only has 1 kidney left. Her liver was lacerated, her pelvis broken in 3 areas, going from front to back and down the middle in the shape of a T, and in 2 areas on the back side. Her spine has a permanent curve in it. Severe road rash all over her body. Pictures 4 or 5. Go to 5, please. That's her backside from being drugged. Go to the next one, please. That's the other side of her backside from being drugged. Next one, please. That's her leg. A whole chunk of meat was missing from her leg. You can take those down, please. She was given multiple bags of blood and platelets as we were transferred to the 4th floor ICU for critical care. It was there that the doctor sat me down and explained how she needed to be intubated because of the extensive damage to her lungs and body. The hardest moment of my life was making the phone call to my children. The hardest moment of my life was making the phone call to my other children so they could tell their sister how much they loved her, because I had no idea what was to come next. They were so confused and scared, and I could hear the hurt and pain in their voices. And I had no explanation to give them other than just tell your sister how much you love her. I couldn't be there to hold them while they cried in a time that they needed me the most. I still hold so much guilt because I couldn't be there with them, since I had to be with their sister, whose life was uncertain at the time. They were also mentally and emotionally traumatized. There were so many times I just wanted to hold Jessalyn or lay in the bed next to her, but I couldn't, since there were tubes coming from every direction, and her hands were tied down to the bed. The most I could do was hold her hand, stroke her head, and whisper in her ear, "I love you, and Mommy is here." I believe it was day 2 when we spent 3 to 4 hours just to thoroughly clean out all of the road rash, and it took multiple attempts to get as much of the leaves, sticks, and rocks out of her hair. There were so many sleepless nights. Every day there were new issues, high fevers, allergic reactions, sepsis, and monitors that were blaring and alarming because her stats were up and down constantly. I felt like I just could not catch a break. She was not easy to keep sedated, and there were so many wrestling matches to keep her as still as possible. It was all so exhausting, but yet I had to hold it all together. I had to be the rock. I hated watching the machine they used to help clear out her lungs. It was similar to a nebulizer, but had a force so strong, and it was so loud. It would pump the meds in and jostle her whole body. Just hearing how loud the machine was and watching her body being uncontrollably shaken was overwhelming, but it had to be done to clear all the fluid and mucus buildup from all the damage that you caused to her lungs. The time we were trying to wean her off the ventilator, I sat and watched the machine, hoping this girl would start to breathe on her own and not rely on the machine to do it for her. It took days and many trials. I would get my hopes up, and then they would be let down. I would talk to her. Come on, Jessa, you have to breathe above the machine. You can do it, and I believe in you. Until finally I realized she wasn't ready. I just let her know it was okay, and I'm here by your side, and when you are ready, I will still be here, right next to you, by your side. I had so many mixed emotions the day Jessalyn was extubated. I couldn't wait to hear her voice again, to hug her, and to tell her how much I missed her. It felt like my girl was being reborn again. But I was not expecting the new hardships to come. She has had a total of 18 surgeries. Her first major surgery was to fix her pelvis. 12 hours my child was gone away from me that day. She now has a metal plate with 11 screws holding her pelvis together for the rest of her life. Picture 8, please. It took months for her to start to walk again. I never imagined that at 11 years old, we would be celebrating the first time she sat up or stood, and of all things, take out a tube feeding. You can go to picture 9. How does that look for sitting up? Does she look happy? I don't think so. Weaning off the narcotics and dealing with the hallucinations she had was terrible. She was so mean at times, and it hurt more than you could imagine on the inside, but I knew that that wasn't my child. Deep down, I was so angry, frustrated, and wanted to scream. So I'd just step out of the room and cry a little, take a deep breath, and walk back into that room stronger than I was before. You can take that down. Discharge day was so exciting and scary. I could finally see my 2-year-old, my other children, and be comfortable in my home. But managing all of Jessalyn's medical appointments, medications, daily shots, and personal needs on top of caring for 4 other children was difficult. Her dignity was taken away as I had to do everything for her for personal cares. And what 11-year-old wants her mom to wash their bottom? She would get frustrated trying to use both the wheelchair and a walker, and half the time she would forcefully shake that walker around and toss it off to the side. And having to load and unload her wheelchair, walker, and medical equipment took about 30 minutes in the freezing cold. The first day I had to take Jessa and my 2-year-old out was rough. When backing out of the driveway, I ran over her walker and broke it. I laugh now, but yep, I forgot to put it in the car. I sat there in disbelief, laughing and crying all at the same time. I was a mental wreck. We ended up back at Children's Hospital a couple of days after discharge when Jessalyn was struggling to breathe. Found out she was suffering from tracheal stenosis from the initial prolonged intubation. You can do picture 10. That was the hole she was trying to breathe through. About the size of a straw, a little bit smaller. 80% of her trachea was closed off. You can go to picture 11. That's the size they had to pop it open to, just so that way she could actually breathe. You can turn that off, please. I slept on my couch for months because her breathing was so bad that I was scared she would stop breathing in her sleep. 15 surgeries on her trachea before we made the decision to do a tracheal resection. I hated the thought of doing this major surgery, the thought of possibly opening her chest to lift the chest muscles to give more stretch to the trachea, or the possibility of injuring her vocal cords, along with all the other risks. They were also very overwhelming. We only get one breathing tube, and if this major surgery wasn't successful, then she would end up with a hole and a tube in her neck for the rest of her life to breathe from. Jessalyn and I both cried together after that doctor left the room. How do you mentally prepare yourself or even your child for this type of news? Telling her that she would be asleep and intubated for another 2 weeks and in the ICU, and then eventually go home once we did the whole removing the tube, feeding, sitting, standing, walking, and everything all over again. We were all going back to square one. She was so calm that day when she left the room for her surgery, but I knew she was freaking out on the inside. She held herself together so well. And I remember her looking at me saying, "Mom, why are you crying?" as I let the silent tears roll down my face. That surgery took 6.5 hours. I stared out windows and paced for hours, hoping for the best outcome. On day 2 after that surgery, a lobe of her lung collapsed. She was running fevers and she was retaining too much fluid. We continued for days with her vitals going sky high, then dangerously low, fevers up to 104, and she became septic all over again. It was day 4 through the night when everything became beyond scary. Her body swelled in a matter of hours, and scans came back showing that she had pneumatosis intestinalis and necrotizing enterocolitis. And she was almost rushed down for an emergency bowel resection, as this had become life-threatening extremely fast. There was no real understanding as to why this was happening, other than that her intestines were not fully healed from the parade incident. Her body was shutting down. 9 days she spent on the ventilator, a total of 12 in the ICU and more on the main floor. It was another full 2-week stay at Children's Hospital, 2 weeks of mental and emotional upset, and 2 weeks away from my other children. And if you are sitting here thinking that being taken off the ventilator is all pretty rainbows and butterflies, you're wrong. It's nothing like what you see on TV. Go ahead. Yep.
That is trauma. I can't.
I know that is traumatizing, isn't it? It is traumatizing. It's okay though. You're doing great, right? Yeah. Get you some oxygen.
I can't.
You can't. No, you just breathe. No.
Just breathe.
She struggled to breathe and cough up all that mucus for hours. Hours. Her mental state was off as she thrashed around and freaked out as the nurses were adjusting her bed, screaming, "Mom, help! Help me, Mom, they're going to shock me back to life." She thought that she was dying and that they were going to kill her. I knew that she had some worries before that surgery, but to this extent was beyond belief. We had to give her meds to calm her, as her thrashing around was our biggest fear, as that could tear her trachea all over again. Even on all those drugs, isn't it funny how she can still express how traumatizing this has all been? The summer went on with more appointments, physical therapy, surgeries, activity restrictions, weaning off of narcotics that made her so mean to the point that I had to step away and do that silent cry again. We tried to find a little happiness in every event that we could. It was hard for her to watch her teammates, who were all back dancing. She cried because she wanted to go watch the state competition, but couldn't since she had to be in another surgery. We felt left out and alone as we were still dealing with major medical issues months later, when out in the public, people would gawk, make hand gestures, and make comments about the scars across her neck. Number 13. Along with the marks and lumps on her body. Kids are cruel and have made some really harsh comments, to the point I have felt a surge of uncontrollable anger. She was tired that day. At fairs and festivals, Jessalyn wasn't able to ride rides because of the possibility of tearing her trachea. You can take it down. She was so sad and angry, more angry than sad. Her friends and family were having a blast while she was standing, watching. My heart hurt for her. I had to talk her through the anger over and over and over and teach her how to find happiness in everything we do, no matter how big or how small. But she was right. It wasn't fair. She shouldn't have had to suffer. Not one person should have had to. My heart was broken the day she purposely stood out in the sun because she wanted the scars off of her face. You can post it. My heart was broken the day she purposely stand out in the sun because she wanted the scars off of her face and wanted her beautiful brown skin back. I guess it made sense to her that tanning would help. While riding in the car, she will freak out when there is a squirrel in the road. A squirrel. Okay? A squirrel. She gasps, yells, and throws her arms out and hits me. While I'm calming her, I sit there and envision how I'm sure that that's the exact reaction she had right before she took your SUV to her chest. This is all just a small fraction of what we've all been through and what I've had to push through in the last year. You can take it down. Jessalyn still has ongoing medical care, more surgeries, more appointments, memory loss, pain in her hip, and permanent curve in her spine. I hate the comments she makes about whenever she feels her hardware in her hip. But my girl is a warrior. She is back dancing. She may not be at the skill level she used to be, but she has not given up. As a parent, I have held so much guilt for not protecting my child that day. I have sat there by my child when she was at her worst. I was there for every little step of progress, and I was there for every setback. I have cried. I have been angry. I have had to deal with fear, mental trauma, PTSD, exhaustion, frustration, defeat, loneliness, and anxiety attacks. There are days when I feel that SUV hitting my chest and can't breathe as if I am my daughter. I could feel her pain, and it was excruciating. There have been times where I felt justice wouldn't be served until he had to take that SUV to his chest, drugged, thrown, and left with his bare body in the middle of the street, exactly the same way he treated my child. This man has brought out such an ugly side of me I never knew existed. It's not your life on the line, Mr. Brooks, and it never has been. It was my child's life on the line that night, along with many others. And as much as you were hoping to get some sympathy, I have none to give. I'm glad I don't have to hear those words come from your mouth anymore. I guess you should have thought about all those children of yours that you don't get to hold before you decided to turn that corner and step on that gas pedal. And I hope the look on my daughter's face before you ran her over haunts you for the rest of your life. Your immature behavior of rolling your eyes and twirling your fingers doesn't bother me. I have fought through one of my biggest fears this past year, and I won. I am much stronger than you. I have found my peace. This man may have been able to turn my life upside down and almost take my daughter from me, take time away from my other children, create such heartache, pain, and mental turmoil, but the one thing he was not successful at was taking my strength, Jessalyn's strength, along with the strength I have instilled in all my other children. He doesn't get the satisfaction of thinking we have become weak. My family has grown stronger, have become closer, and now have a better appreciation for the time we have together. He did not, cannot, and will not break me. Thank you.
Thank you.